What if your survival didn't depend on dozens of foods, but just 6? Most people are stocking up wrong. Miss these, and your pantry could fail when it matters most. Canned tomatoes, the base that decides whether meals work or fail. When people start building a pantry, they usually focus on what feels important at first glance. Protein gets attention, rice and pasta get stacked in bulk, but then something subtle happens that most people don't notice until later. The meals start to feel incomplete. The ingredients are there, but the food doesn't come together in a way that feels satisfying. That gap is exactly where canned tomatoes quietly become one of the most valuable items on the shelf. Tomatoes are not just another vegetable you add for variety. They act as a foundation. When you combine rice with beans or pasta with a small amount of protein, tomatoes are what turn those combinations into actual meals instead of just mixed ingredients. They bring acidity, moisture, and depth, which reduces the need for additional expensive ingredients. Without that base, people often end up relying on more meat, more oil, or more seasoning just to make food taste complete. Right now, the situation around tomatoes is not as stable as it looks on the surface. Reports from Florida showed that winter freeze conditions caused significant damage to tomato crops, affecting a large portion of production. At the same time, market updates have pointed out that overall supply is tightening and prices are moving upward. On the processing side, expectations for future tomato production in California are also lower compared to earlier forecasts. That affects everything from sauces to canned products that people depend on. This combination does not create an immediate shortage, but it creates pressure. When supply gets tighter, stores start adjusting quietly. Promotions become less frequent, pricing becomes less predictable, and shoppers have fewer options to choose from. That is usually how these changes show up first. People don't notice until they realize that what used to be easy to find is suddenly less available or more expensive. From a practical standpoint, canned tomatoes give flexibility. Whole and diced tomatoes help add structure to meals. Crushed tomatoes and sauces blend quickly into soups and stews. Tomato paste delivers concentrated flavor in a very small space, which makes it one of the most efficient items to store. This range of uses allows a pantry to adapt instead of feeling locked into repetitive meals. And if tomatoes are missing, the entire pantry feels weaker. Meals become bland, repetitive, and harder to rely on day after day. With tomatoes, even simple ingredients can be turned into something that feels complete and satisfying. That difference is not small. It determines whether a pantry actually works when it needs to. Canned beans, the backbone of a practical pantry. Once the base of meals is established, the next issue is protein that can be relied on consistently. This is where most people either overspend or make things unnecessarily complicated. They focus heavily on fresh meat or specialty items, which creates dependence on refrigeration and timing. What often gets overlooked is one of the simplest and most dependable options available: canned beans. Beans like black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, and white beans provide a combination of protein, fiber, and substance that is difficult to replace with other shelf-stable foods. They are already cooked, which means they can be used immediately without soaking or long preparation times. That alone makes them extremely practical in situations where time or resources are limited. Production data shows that bean output in the United States has declined, with reductions in both planted and harvested areas along with lower yields. At the same time, drought conditions have expanded across large parts of the country, which adds another layer of uncertainty to future supply. This is not the kind of situation that creates headlines, but it creates gradual pressure that affects availability and pricing over time. What usually happens is not a sudden change. Instead, the most affordable options start disappearing first. Store brands become harder to find, sales become less frequent, and the variety available in stores begins to shrink. Eventually, people notice that the specific beans they use most often are no longer consistently available. Canned beans solve multiple problems at once. They provide reliable nutrition, they pair easily with other pantry items, and they help stretch meals further. When combined with tomatoes and corn, they create a complete base for meals. Adding a small amount of protein like chicken or salmon makes that combination even stronger. They also remove the need for extended cooking times. Dry beans require soaking and hours of cooking, which may not always be practical. Canned beans eliminate that step, making them easier to use under different conditions. A pantry without beans often ends up relying too heavily on simple carbohydrates. That creates meals that fill space, but do not provide sustained energy. Beans help balance that out and make the pantry more stable over time. They are not flashy, but they consistently do the work that most other foods cannot. Canned sweet corn, the quiet multiplier. Most people ignore. Corn is often treated as something optional, something that gets added occasionally but is not considered essential. That perception overlooks how much value canned sweet corn actually brings, especially when fresh supply becomes unreliable. Recent reports showed that sweet corn production in Florida faced severe losses due to freeze conditions, with some areas experiencing complete crop failure. At the same time, supply alerts indicated that available corn was limited, quality was inconsistent, and demand remained strong. When fresh options decline under these conditions, people naturally shift toward canned alternatives. Canned corn plays a unique role because it adds more than just flavor. It contributes calories, texture, and a slight sweetness that helps balance out meals that might otherwise feel repetitive. When working with basic ingredients like rice, beans, and canned protein, that small difference becomes noticeable over time. It also stretches meals in a practical way. Adding corn to soups, stews, or rice dishes increases volume without requiring additional effort. This allows meals to serve more people or last longer, which becomes important when managing limited supplies. Another factor is familiarity. Many canned vegetables feel like a downgrade from fresh versions, but corn tends to maintain a taste and texture that people accept more easily. This matters because food needs to be usable, not just stored. If people avoid eating what is in the pantry, the system breaks down regardless of how much food is available. As fresh supply becomes less reliable, more people turn to canned corn at the same time. That shift increases demand quickly, which affects pricing and availability. What used to be an easy add-on becomes something people actively look for. Before moving forward, if this breakdown is helping you rethink how a pantry should actually work, take a second to subscribe. It keeps you updated without missing the next critical piece. Canned chicken, the stable protein that removes risk. Protein is one of the most challenging parts of building a reliable pantry. Fresh options depend on refrigeration, consistent supply, and timing. When any of those factors change, the entire system becomes less predictable. This is where canned chicken provides a clear advantage. Canned chicken offers ready-to-use protein that does not rely on storage conditions or immediate use. It can be kept for long periods and used whenever needed without planning around refrigeration or cooking time. That flexibility makes it one of the most practical options available. Industry reports have pointed to concerns about chicken production, particularly related to disease pressure affecting poultry. When production slows or becomes uncertain, prices tend to increase and availability becomes less consistent. This does not mean fresh chicken disappears, but it does mean that relying entirely on it introduces risk. Canned chicken avoids those issues. It provides a stable option that can be used across a wide range of meals. It works in rice dishes, pasta, soups, and simple combinations that require minimal preparation. This makes it useful not only for storage, but also for everyday use. Another advantage is balance. A pantry built only around plant-based protein can start to feel limited over time. Adding canned chicken creates variety and makes meals more satisfying. This variety helps maintain consistency in eating habits, which is often overlooked when planning storage. Canned chicken also fits easily into regular meal rotation. It can be used in lunches, quick dinners, and simple recipes, which makes it easier to manage inventory without waste. That practicality is what makes it valuable. When supply chains become less predictable, having a protein source that does not depend on timing or conditions becomes critical. Canned chicken fills that role without adding complexity. Canned salmon, the nutritional backup that adds depth. Canned salmon often gets overlooked because people focus on more common protein sources. However, it provides a level of nutritional value that is difficult to match with other shelf-stable foods. Global market projections suggest that salmon supply will remain relatively tight while demand continues to grow. This imbalance creates upward pressure on prices, making fresh salmon less accessible over time. Early forecasts from Alaska also indicate lower expected runs for certain types of wild salmon, which adds to the overall pressure. As these factors combine, salmon moves further into a premium category. When that happens, canned salmon becomes an important alternative that maintains access to its nutritional benefits. Canned salmon provides protein along with beneficial fats that are not as common in other canned foods. It can be used in a variety of meals, including rice bowls, sandwiches, and mixed dishes that require minimal preparation. It also works as a standalone option when cooking is not possible. Variety is where salmon makes a significant difference. A pantry that relies on the same few protein sources can become difficult to maintain over time. People may have enough food, but they lose interest in eating it regularly. This is not a supply issue, it is a usability issue. Salmon helps prevent that by introducing a different flavor and texture. This keeps meals from becoming repetitive and makes it easier to maintain consistent eating habits. That consistency is what allows a pantry to function effectively over time. As supply tightens and pricing shifts, canned salmon becomes a way to maintain access to these benefits without relying on fresh options that may become less predictable. Canned peaches and mixed fruit, the factor that keeps everything sustainable. The last category is often underestimated, but it plays a critical role in making a pantry sustainable over time. Canned fruit, especially peaches and mixed fruit, provides balance in a system that would otherwise feel heavy and repetitive. Changes in food processing capacity, particularly in California, have affected the production of canned fruit. The closure of a major processing facility and the inability to fully replace its output create a situation where supply may become less stable. This does not result in immediate shortages, but it leads to fewer promotions, reduced availability, and less consistency in lower-cost options. Canned fruit addresses several practical needs. It provides a ready-to-eat option that requires no preparation. It offers a longer shelf life than fresh fruit. It also introduces variety into a pantry that might otherwise focus heavily on savory foods. Now consider this carefully. If supply tightens, prices shift, or access becomes less predictable, would your current pantry still function the way you expect it to? Or would it start breaking down piece by piece? That answer is what decides whether preparation actually works.